I found out my sister stole my $15,000 wedding venue by pretending to be me exactly 2 weeks before my wedding. And the moment the woman on the phone said, "We processed the refund as you requested and confirmed your sister's booking instead," I felt my entire body go cold. Not just because of what had happened, but because of who had done it. Because Carla wasn't just my sister, she was the same person who'd been chosen over me my entire life, starting with the day my mother left me with $2 at age 11 and took Carla to Europe instead. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was standing in the wedding favor aisle of a craft store, surrounded by tiny organza bags and personalized candles, trying to make decisions about details that suddenly felt absurdly small. My phone rang, and the name on the screen said Riverside Estate, the venue I'd booked 9 months earlier after visiting 11 different locations with my fiancé, Daniel, the place with the garden overlooking the valley and the string lights that looked like something out of a fairy tale. I answered, expecting a confirmation call, maybe a question about the final head count. Instead, I got Monica, the event coordinator, and her voice had that careful, confused tone people use when they think they've made a mistake but aren't sure whose mistake it is. "Hi, Emma, this is Monica from Riverside Estate," she said, professional and polite. "I'm calling to confirm the cancellation you requested yesterday. We've processed the refund to your original card, minus the cancellation fee as outlined in your contract, and we've confirmed the new booking for your sister Carla on the earlier date. I just wanted to make sure you received the confirmation email and that everything on our end is clear." I stood there with a bag of ribbon in my hand, and for a long moment the words didn't connect, like my brain refused to process them because processing them would mean accepting something impossible. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, my voice coming out thin and strange. "I didn't cancel anything." There was a pause, the kind of silence that stretches just long enough for reality to tilt. "Oh," Monica said, and I could hear her shifting gears, confusion turning into concern. "But we received a call yesterday from this number, and the caller verified your full name, your booking reference number, the last 4 digits of the card on file, and your birth date. She said there was a family emergency and you needed to move the date, and then she rebooked the same venue under the name Carla Jensen for a date 2 weeks earlier. She mentioned you two had coordinated it together." My heart started pounding, a sick, heavy rhythm that made my hands shake. "What exactly did this person say?" I asked, and my voice was steadier than I felt. Monica hesitated, and I could hear papers rustling. "She said, and I'm reading from the notes here, that you were dealing with a family situation and needed to postpone, and that she was calling on your behalf to cancel. Then she asked about earlier availability, and when I mentioned we'd just had a cancellation for 2 weeks prior, she said that would be perfect and provided a new name and deposit for that date. She knew all your details, Emma. We verified everything according to protocol." The words landed like stones. She knew all your details. Of course she did, because I'd given them to her. I'd sent Carla my entire wedding planning spreadsheet, every vendor contact, every password, every confirmation number, because she was my maid of honor and I'd trusted her with everything. My throat tightened and I realized I was gripping the ribbon so hard my knuckles had gone white. "The new booking," I said carefully, forcing the words out. "You said it's under Carla Jensen?" Monica confirmed, her voice shifting now, understanding creeping in that something was very wrong. "Yes, that's correct. Carla Jensen. She mentioned she was your sister and that this was a family arrangement." Carla, my younger sister by 3 years, the golden child, the one my mother had always defended, always forgiven, always chosen. The same sister who'd gone to Europe with my mother when I was 11 years old, leaving me behind in an empty apartment with 2 crumpled dollar bills and a note that said, "Be responsible. Don't call unless it's an emergency." I felt something crack open inside me. Not loudly, but like a fracture that had been there for years, finally splitting wide. "I need to call you back," I managed to say, and I hung up before Monica could respond. I stood in the middle of the craft store, surrounded by strangers picking out party supplies and decorations, and I felt the weight of 20 years come crashing down, because this wasn't new. This was the same pattern I'd lived my entire life, just dressed up in a different betrayal. When I was 11 years old, my mother sat me down at our kitchen table on a Wednesday afternoon and told me she was going to Europe for a month. "I need a break," she'd said, her voice light, almost excited, like she was telling me about a fun surprise. "You're old enough to take care of yourself now. Aunt Denise will check in on you." I remember staring at her, not understanding. "What about school?" I'd asked. "What about Hood?" My mother had waved her hand dismissively, already moving around the apartment packing. "You'll be fine," she said. "There's some money for groceries. You're the oldest. You can handle it." Then she'd paused, looked at my little sister Carla, and smiled in a way she never smiled at me. "Carla's coming with me," she announced. "She's never seen Paris. It'll be educational." Carla, 8 years old, with soft curls my mother brushed every night and a laugh that made my mother's whole face light up. Carla, who got the good snacks and the new clothes and the forgiveness when she broke the rules. Carla, who was loved in the easy, uncomplicated way I'd spent my whole childhood trying to earn. I watched my mother pack Carla's little suitcase with care, folding her dresses, tucking in her favorite stuffed bear, while my own bag sat in the corner, untouched, because I wasn't going anywhere. The morning they left, my mother handed me 2 $1 bills folded into a tight square and a note written on the back of an old envelope. "Be responsible," it said in her looping handwriting. "Don't call me unless it's an emergency." Then she kissed Carla on the forehead, told her how excited she was, and walked out the door with their suitcases bumping down the stairs. I ran to the window and watched them load the car, watched my mother buckle Carla into the back seat, watched them drive away. And then I stood in the silent apartment holding $2 and tried to figure out how I was supposed to survive a month. Aunt Denise showed up that afternoon, a woman who smelled like cigarette smoke and resentment, and from the moment she walked in, I knew she didn't want to be there. "Your mother said you'd be fine on your own," she announced, looking around at the half-empty cabinets with a curled lip. "I'm just here to make sure you don't burn the place down." She didn't bring groceries. She didn't ask if I'd eaten. She made herself comfortable on our couch, turned on the TV, and told me to stay out of her way. That first week, I learned what hunger felt like, the kind that sits in your stomach and makes you feel hollow and shaky. I learned how to stretch $2 across 7 days by taking extra packets of ketchup and crackers from the school cafeteria, by drinking water until I felt full, by pretending I wasn't hungry when my stomach cramped at night. I learned how to be invisible, how to ask for nothing, how to survive on the edges of other people's care. Miss Alvarez, our neighbor from down the hall, was the one who saved me. She noticed. She saw me sitting on the building steps one evening, too tired to go inside, and she sat down next to me and asked in her soft, accented voice, "Where is your mother?" I told her the truth because I didn't know how to lie yet. "Europe," I said, "with my sister." Miss Alvarez's face changed, something hardening in her eyes, and she stood and held out her hand. "Come," she said. "You eat." She fed me rice and beans and chicken, and I ate so fast I almost choked because I was terrified she'd take it away, terrified this kindness was temporary. But she just watched me with sad eyes and refilled my plate. "Your mother," she said quietly. "She left you alone?" I shook my head quickly. "Aunt Denise is staying with us," I said, defensive even then, even when I was the one being abandoned. Miss Alvarez made a sound in her throat, something between anger and pity. "And she feeds you?" I didn't answer, and that was answer enough. Miss Alvarez started bringing me food after that, Tupperware containers she'd leave by our door with a knock, or invitations to eat with her family that I accepted with a guilt I didn't understand until years later. She taught me how to survive. She gave me a list of places I could go after school, libraries, community centers, anywhere safe and warm. She slipped me a $10 bill once and told me it was for emergencies, and I hid it in my sock drawer like it was a treasure. My mother came back on day 31, tanned and glowing with shopping bags full of souvenirs and a smile that made her look 10 years younger. Carla ran through the door chattering about the Eiffel Tower and the museums and the pastries, and my mother scooped her up and spun her around, laughing. Then she looked at me, standing in the hallway, thinner than I'd been a month ago, and said, "You're still in one piece. See, I told you you'd be fine." She didn't ask how I'd survived. She didn't notice the empty cabinets, or the pile of ketchup packets I'd hidden in my room, or the way I flinched when Aunt Denise yelled. She unpacked her suitcase, showed me a keychain shaped like the Eiffel Tower that she'd bought as an afterthought, and moved on. A week later, when I showed her the $68 I'd saved from babysitting Miss Alvarez's niece and walking a neighbor's dog, money I'd earned doing anything I could think of to feel less helpless, she held out her hand without hesitation. "Good," she said, "I need that for bills." I handed it over, every single dollar, because at 11 I still believed that obedience was love. She took it, stuffed it in her purse, and didn't say thank you. That was the first time I realized my pain didn't matter to her. It wouldn't be the last. Now, standing in a craft store 20 years later with a phone call ringing in my ears, I realized Carla had learned from the best. She'd learned that taking from me had no consequences, that my feelings were negotiable, that I would always be the one expected to survive it. I drove home in a daze, and when I walked through the door, Daniel took one look at my face and put down the laptop he'd been working on. "What happened?" he said, and it wasn't a question. I told him everything: the phone call, the cancellation, the rebooking, the fact that Carla had used my information, my money, my venue, and stolen my wedding 2 weeks before the date. Daniel's expression shifted through disbelief, confusion, and then into a cold, focused anger I rarely saw from him. "She pretended to be you," he said slowly, like he needed to hear it out loud to believe it. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Daniel stood, pacing now, his hands running through his hair. "That's fraud," he said. "That's identity theft. Emma, that's illegal." I sank onto the couch, the reality settling over me like a weight. "I know," I whispered. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at me. "Did you know she was even engaged?" he asked. I shook my head. I hadn't known. Carla and I texted occasionally, surface-level things, memes and photos, the kind of relationship that looked close from the outside but had no depth. She'd never mentioned a boyfriend named Ryan. She'd never said anything about a wedding, and yet she'd known everything about mine. Daniel sat next to me, his hand finding mine. "We're calling her," he said. I wanted to say no, wanted to avoid the confrontation I knew was coming, but Daniel was already dialing, putting the phone on speaker. It rang 3 times, and then Carla's voice filled the room, bright and casual. "Hey, what's up?" she said, like this was a normal Tuesday. Daniel didn't waste time. "Did you cancel Emma's wedding venue?" he asked, his voice hard. Silence. Then Carla laughed, nervous and high. "Oh my God," she said. "Did the venue call you? Look, I can explain, don't freak out." The fact that she didn't deny it, didn't even try to lie, made my hands curl into fists. "Explain," I said, my voice shaking. Carla sighed, dramatic and put upon. "Okay, so Ryan proposed like 5 months ago, and we've been trying to find a venue, but everything decent is completely booked for the next year. And then I remembered you had Riverside, and I just thought, you're so good at planning, you'll figure something else out. And I really needed this, Emma, like you don't understand the pressure I've been under. You stole my venue," I interrupted, and my voice cracked. "You called them, pretended to be me, used my information, and canceled my wedding 2 weeks before the date." Carla scoffed. "I didn't steal anything," she snapped, defensive now. "I moved it. You still have time to find another place. It's not like your wedding is tomorrow." I felt something break inside me, something that had been barely holding together. "Carla," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice from shaking, "my wedding is in 14 days. 14. Every venue within 100 miles is booked. Do you understand what you just did?" She laughed again, shorter this time, meaner. "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic," she said. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd make it into a huge thing. Look, I already paid for everything, okay? I used the refund they gave you and added my own money for the deposit. It's done. And honestly, Emma, you'll figure it out. You always do." The entitlement, the casualness, the assumption that my time and effort and dreams were just resources for her to use hit me like a slap. But it wasn't surprising, because this was who Carla had always been, the golden child, the one who got taken to Paris while I got $2, the one who got forgiveness while I got lectures, the one who learned, from our mother's example, that I existed to solve problems and absorb pain. "You used my refund," I said, my voice flat now. Carla hesitated for the first time. "Well, yeah," she said, like it was obvious. "It went back to your card, but I needed it for the deposit, so I just—" "You stole my money," I said, cutting her off. "You committed fraud." Carla's tone turned icy. "Don't be so dramatic," she hissed. "It's family money. You'll get it back eventually. And honestly, Emma, you've always had everything. The perfect grades, the perfect job, the perfect boyfriend. I finally have something good happening, and you can't even be happy for me for 5 seconds?" I felt the familiar twist of guilt start to rise, the old programming that said I was selfish for having boundaries, that I was the problem for not accommodating her. But then I thought about being 11 and hungry. I thought about my mother taking my babysitting money. I thought about a lifetime of being told my pain didn't count. "I'm done," I said, and I hung up before she could say another word. Daniel stared at me, his face pale. "What do we do?" he asked. I took a shaky breath, trying to think past the panic. "We fight," I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it. We started with the venue. I called Monica back, explained as calmly as I could that I had not authorized any cancellation, that my sister had impersonated me and committed fraud, and that I needed my booking reinstated immediately. Monica listened, and I could hear the genuine regret in her voice when she responded. "I believe you, Emma," she said, "but legally, once a cancellation is processed and a new contract is signed, we can't reverse it without the new client's agreement. The person who called verified all your information correctly, so we followed our standard protocol. This is now a dispute between you and your sister." My chest tightened. "So she can just steal my wedding and there's nothing you can do?" Monica sighed. "If your sister is willing to cancel her booking, we can reinstate yours immediately, but we can't force her to do that. What I can do is provide you with documentation of both transactions, which you can use if you decide to pursue this legally." Legal. The word hung in the air. Daniel was already nodding. "We need a lawyer," he said. That afternoon, we sat in the office of a lawyer named Diane Chen, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. We walked her through everything: the phone call, the cancellation, Carla's admission, the refund that had been taken and reused without my permission. Diane listened without interrupting, taking notes, and when we finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me directly. "Your sister committed identity theft and fraud," she said simply. "She impersonated you to access your contract, stole your refund, and used it for her own benefit. This is criminal. If she doesn't voluntarily undo what she's done, we can escalate this to the police, and I can almost guarantee you'll win in civil court as well." Hearing someone say it so plainly, criminal, fraud, theft, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just a family argument. This was a crime. "What do we do first?" Daniel asked. Diane pulled out a legal pad. "First, we send a cease and desist letter," she said. "Formal, legal, clear. We demand that she cancel the fraudulent booking, return the funds, and cease all use of your personal information. We give her 72 hours to comply. If she refuses, we file a police report and pursue civil action." I nodded, my hands shaking in my lap. Diane looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "I know this is hard," she said, "but you're doing the right thing. People like your sister count on you being too afraid or too guilty to push back. Don't give her that power." We sent the letter that evening. It was formal and cold, laying out exactly what Carla had done and exactly what the consequences would be if she didn't fix it. 72 hours. I tried to prepare myself for her response, but nothing could have prepared me for how fast and how vicious it came. She called the next morning, and the second I answered, she started screaming. You sent me a legal threat?" she shouted, her voice shaking with rage. "Are you out of your mind? I'm your sister." I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You committed fraud, Carla," I said evenly. "I gave you a chance to fix it. You didn't. So yes, I'm fixing it legally." Carla laughed, sharp and cruel. "You are insane," she spat. "This is a family issue and you're treating me like a criminal." "You are a criminal," I said, and my voice didn't waver. "You stole my identity. You stole my money. You stole my wedding. That's fraud. So you can either cancel the booking and return my money, or I'm filing a police report." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, could almost feel the calculation happening. Then her voice came back colder than I'd ever heard it. "You really want to destroy our relationship over a building?" she said. The fact that she still thought this was about a building and not about a lifetime of being treated like I didn't matter made my chest ache. "You destroyed it," I said quietly, "the second you decided I was someone you could steal from." Carla sucked in a breath. "Fine," she hissed. "Keep your stupid venue. I'll find somewhere else. But don't ever call yourself my sister again." She hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, waiting to feel relieved, waiting to feel victorious. But all I felt was empty. 3 hours later, Monica called. "Emma," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Carla Jensen just called and canceled her booking. Your original date is available again. Would you like me to reinstate it?" I felt my knees go weak. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, yes." By the end of the call, my wedding was back. Daniel picked me up and hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe, and I felt tears streaming down my face, a mix of relief and grief and exhaustion. We'd won, but it didn't feel like winning. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back: the anger, the betrayal, the bone-deep sadness of realizing that my sister had looked at my life and seen something she could take, and that my mother had taught her it was okay. Because the pattern was so clear now. My mother had taken from me my whole life, my childhood, my security, my money, my peace, and called it lessons. And Carla had watched and learned that I was the person you took from when you needed something. I was the responsible one, the one who'd figure it out, the one whose pain didn't count. The next day, I did something I'd been avoiding. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and warm. "Hi, honey, how are you? How's the wedding coming?" I didn't ease into it. "Did you know Carla got engaged?" I asked. There was a pause, just long enough to tell me everything. "Oh," my mother said carefully. "She mentioned Ryan proposed, yes." My stomach dropped. "You knew," I said. "She told you she was engaged and you didn't tell me." My mother sighed. "She asked me not to say anything yet," she said, like that was reasonable. "She wasn't ready to make it public." I felt the anger rising, hot and sharp. "She stole my wedding venue, Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "She called Riverside Estate, pretended to be me, canceled my booking, took my refund, and rebooked it for herself, 2 weeks before my wedding." Silence. Then my mother laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "That doesn't sound like Carla," she said. "Emma, are you sure there wasn't just some kind of mix-up?" I wanted to scream. "There was no mix-up," I said, my voice rising. "She admitted it. She said I'd figure something else out." My mother made a soft, dismissive sound. "Well, honey, she probably just panicked," she said, her tone shifting into peacemaker mode. "You know how Carla is. She doesn't always think things through. But she's your sister. I'm sure if you just talk to her calmly—" "I did talk to her," I interrupted. "She told me I was being dramatic, so I sent her a legal letter and she gave my venue back." My mother's voice changed, sharpening. "You did what?" she said. "You sent your sister a legal threat?" I felt my jaw tighten. "She committed fraud, Mom," I said. "She stole from me." My mother's tone turned cold. "She made a mistake," she snapped, "and instead of handling it like family, you're treating her like a stranger. Do you have any idea how much you've hurt her?" The absurdity of it, the complete inversion of reality, hit me like a punch. "How much I've hurt her?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Mom, she stole my wedding." My mother sighed, long and tired, like I was exhausting her. "A wedding venue is just a place, Emma," she said. "You're making this into something bigger than it is. You've always been so sensitive. Carla is going through a hard time right now, and instead of being supportive, you're punishing her." Supportive. The word made me feel sick. "I was 11 years old," I said, and my voice came out quiet and raw, "and you left me with $2 and took Carla to Europe." My mother went silent. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could almost see her face, the way it would close off when I brought up anything she didn't want to remember. "That again," she said finally, her voice tight. "Emma, I thought we were past this." I laughed, bitter and broken. "Past it?" I said. "Mom, I was a child. I was hungry. I didn't know if you were coming back, and you took Carla and left me alone." My mother's voice turned defensive. "Aunt Denise was there," she snapped. "You weren't alone, and I needed that trip. I was drowning, Emma. I needed a break. You were old enough to understand that." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "I was 11, I said again. "I needed a mother, and you left me." My mother made an exasperated sound. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she said. "You hold on to things. You make everything about you. I did my best, Emma. I'm sorry it wasn't perfect, but I was trying to survive too." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache of trying to explain a wound to the person who caused it. "You took my babysitting money," I said quietly. "I earned $68, and you took it without even saying thank you." My mother scoffed. "I had bills to pay," she said. "You were living in my house. That's called contributing." I felt something inside me give up, some last fragile hope that she would ever see me, ever understand. "I'm done," I said. My mother's voice turned sharp. "What does that mean?" she demanded. "It means I'm done trying to make you care," I said, and my voice was steady now, calm in a way that scared me. "I'm done being the one who has to understand and forgive and accommodate. Carla stole from me, and you defended her, just like you always have." My mother's tone turned icy. "If you cut Carla out, you're cutting me out too," she said, and it sounded like a threat. I thought about it for a long moment. Then I said, "Okay," and I hung up. The days leading up to my wedding were strange, quiet. I kept waiting for the guilt to crush me, for the fear of losing my family to make me take it all back, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt lighter. Daniel and I confirmed every detail with Riverside Estate, double and triple checking that nothing could go wrong. I blocked Carla's number, I stopped answering my mother's calls, and I let myself grieve, not for the people I was losing, but for the people I'd wanted them to be. 2 days before the wedding, my mother showed up at my apartment. I opened the door and found her standing there, her face tight and tired, holding a small gift bag. "I came to talk," she said. I didn't invite her in. "There's nothing to say," I replied. My mother's expression flickered, something between hurt and anger. "You're really going to do this? You're going to throw away your family over a misunderstanding?" I felt the old programming kick in, the urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to make myself smaller so she could feel bigger. But I thought about the $2. I thought about Carla's laugh when she told me to figure it out. I thought about a lifetime of being told my hurt didn't matter. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "It was a choice. Carla chose to steal from me. You chose to defend her, and I'm choosing me." My mother's face hardened. "You'll regret this," she said. I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "I won't." She stood there for another moment, like she was waiting for me to break, and when I didn't, she turned and walked away. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for protecting myself. My wedding day was perfect. The garden at Riverside Estate was bathed in golden light, and the string lights glowed like stars, and Daniel's vows made me cry in the best way. Our friends filled the space with laughter and love, and when I walked down the aisle, I didn't think about the people who weren't there. I thought about the people who were. Miss Alvarez came, elderly now, but still steady, and when she hugged me before the ceremony, she whispered, "I'm proud of you, mija." I thought about the 11-year-old girl she'd fed when no one else would, and I held her tighter. There was an empty seat where my maid of honor should have been, and a few people asked about it, but I just smiled and said, "It's complicated," and left it at that, because the truth was too long and too painful for a wedding day. Daniel and I danced under the lights, and he pulled me close and said, "You did it. You got your day." I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. "We did it," I corrected, because he'd stood beside me through it all, never once suggesting I should just let it go, never once making me feel like my boundaries were too much. That night, after the guests had left and the venue was quiet, Daniel and I stood in the garden alone, and he asked me the question I'd been asking myself. "Do you regret it?" he asked, cutting them off. I thought about my mother's face at the door. I thought about Carla's voice on the phone, cold and dismissive. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn love from people who saw me as a resource, not a person. "I regret that it had to happen," I said slowly, "but I don't regret choosing myself."
The months that followed were quieter than I expected. I didn't hear from Carla at all. My mother called a few times, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading, but I didn't return them. I saw photos on social media. Carla had gotten married 4 months later at a hotel ballroom, and my mother had been there, smiling in all the pictures like nothing was wrong. A cousin reached out to tell me that Carla's marriage was struggling, that her husband, Ryan, had lost his job and they were fighting constantly, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sympathy, just distance. A year after my wedding, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize, and I answered without thinking. "Emma," she said, and her voice sounded small. "I need to talk to you." I almost hung up, but something made me stay on the line. "What?" I said, my voice flat. My mother took a shaky breath. "I'm in trouble," she said. "I lost my job. The rent is overdue. I don't have anyone else to ask. I need help." The words landed with a strange, distant familiarity. I need help. The same woman who'd left me with $2, the same woman who'd taken my babysitting money, the same woman who'd defended Carla for stealing from me. Now she needed help? "What about Carla?" I asked. My mother's voice turned bitter. "Carla can't help," she said. "She and Ryan are barely keeping their heads above water. And she's not speaking to me right now." I felt a flicker of something, not quite satisfaction, but recognition. The golden child had finally stopped being useful. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. My mother hesitated. "Because you're my daughter," she said, and her voice broke. "And I know I know I made mistakes, but I'm asking you, please. I need $1,500 to cover rent, just this once." $1,500. I thought about the $68 she'd taken from an 11-year-old. I thought about the $2 she'd left me with. I thought about the wedding venue and Carla's laughter and a lifetime of being told to be responsible while everyone else got to be reckless. "No," I said. My mother's voice turned sharp. "What do you mean, no?" she demanded. "I'm your mother. I raised you." I felt the anger rise, clean and bright. "You didn't raise me. You left me to raise myself. And now you want me to fix your problems the same way you expected me to fix everything else." My mother started to cry, loud, gasping sobs. "Please, Emma," she begged. "I don't have anyone else. I'll pay you back, I promise. Please." I thought about all the times I'd heard those words before. "I'll pay you back. It's just this once. You're so good at figuring things out." I closed my eyes. I'm going to give you a number, I said. It's for a social services agency. They help people in housing crises. They can connect you with resources. My mother's tears stopped abruptly. I don't need a social worker, she snapped. I need money. I need you to help me. I took a breath. I am helping you, I said. I'm giving you the same thing you gave me, a way to be responsible and figure it out. My mother went silent. Then her voice came back, cold and venomous. You're just like your father, selfish and cruel. The words should have hurt. A year ago, they would have destroyed me. But now I just felt tired. Goodbye, Mom, I said, and I hung up. I sat on my couch afterwards, staring at my phone, and Daniel came and sat beside me. You okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. I think so, I said, and I meant it. 2 years after my wedding, I got a message from Carla. It was short, just a few lines. It said, I know we haven't talked, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I was selfish and I hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. I read it 3 times, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the ask, but there wasn't one, just an apology. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it for a few days, turning it over in my mind. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to reach out, to rebuild, to try again. But the bigger part of me, the part that had survived and learned and finally chosen peace, knew the truth. An apology doesn't erase a pattern, and I didn't owe anyone access to my life just because they'd finally said sorry. I wrote back eventually. I appreciate you saying that. I hope you're doing well, but I'm not ready to reconnect. I hit send and then I blocked her number. Not out of anger, but out of protection. Because some doors once closed are meant to stay that way. My life now is small and quiet and mine. Daniel and I bought a house, we have a dog, we host dinners with friends who show up on time and bring wine and leave without drama. I talk to Miss Alvarez every week, and sometimes I bring her groceries, and we sit at her kitchen table the way we used to when I was 11 and hungry and afraid. She tells me I turned out good, and I believe her now. I don't talk to my mother, I don't talk to Carla, and my life didn't fall apart the way they said it would. It didn't collapse under the weight of my selfishness or my sensitivity. It grew, it softened, it became mine. Sometimes people ask me if I regret cutting off my family, and I tell them the truth. I regret that I had to. I regret that they made choices that forced me to choose between them and my own peace. But I don't regret the choice itself, because the day I stopped waiting for them to see me, I finally started seeing myself. And that 11-year-old girl with $2 in her pocket, the one who learned to survive on scraps and kindness from strangers, she deserved better. She deserved someone who would fight for her, and in the end, that someone was me.